Joan by Carol M Mottershead. Chapter 19. Industrial Revolution. It had been quite some time since Commedia dell'arte had been in England. I tried to reassure everyone that it would take time to rebuild our reputation. And our reputation was indeed good at first. The northeast communities had been deprived of good entertainment for years, and were appreciative audiences. But prejudice and fear after the French Revolution, followed immediately by the Industrial Revolution, changed lives for everyone. The rich became richer, the poor became poorer. To try to improve morale, I started performing my puppet shows to entertain the children of our performers. Neighbours started popping in hoping to catch a performance and would leave a farthing or two on the table as they left. Eventually word got out to the local gentry, and they started to invite me to their garden parties or special occasions. All of a sudden I was in demand. The money I earned I added to the family pot, like all the other monies, less the odd treat here and there, and I felt proud to be earning again. Punchinella didn't like it though. He started acting differently. Maybe I was acting differently, for I would return home feeling rather excited after a party. The children's laughter, their applause, they were great for my ego. My popularity, the appreciation, it felt good. I would return home, pennies jangling in my pockets before adding them to our household funds, and I felt good about myself. The troupe, in contrast, wasn't doing so well. Donations for the street performances were getting less and less, as money among the general public became tighter. I was only too happy to be able to share my good fortune with the rest of the troupe. We were all one big family in my eyes. What's mine is yours, I would say, and everyone seemed to appreciate my efforts, except Punchinella. He became moody, and would joke sarcastically, "Little wifey the breadwinner." His antics became more feckless and thoughtless too. "Things will pick up soon, you'll see," I'd say, but no matter how much I tried to encourage him, nothing seemed to make any difference. I was doing my best for everyone, or so I thought. I was beginning to feel the pressure of the demand for my shows. I felt tired all the time, and found myself becoming more intolerant of Punchinella's irresponsible, childish behaviour. Things between Punchinella and myself were getting tense. It was a few months before things started to change for our troupe. For the better, I might add. They started to get bookings at garden parties or in the homes of the more wealthy. They even got the occasional theatre work. At last, they were being treated as real actors instead of rogues and vagabonds. What a difference owning our own property made. At last we were being seen as respectable. Whatever the reason for the change, it finally meant the pressure was off me to perform my shows, and I could take time to rest. I even dared to hope that Punchinella and I might be able to enjoy some special time together. It had been such a long time since we'd had time to ourselves, just to be alone. I missed him holding me. I missed him lying beside me, feeling his naked body next to mine. We had become so distant with each other. Life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it? Punchinella had been through so much. We all had, really. But he seemed to have been through more somehow. He'd had to face up to killing his best friend and the consequences, and the horror of facing Jack Ketch. The sight of the headless corpses during the Revolution, all lined up as they were with baskets full of heads beside them. I could understand the strain life had put him under. But I miss the way he used to look at me. He'd stopped greeting me with the kiss on my hands that had been his trademark for so long. His cheeky roguish smile that could cheer me up when I was down. I missed my husband. I knew he must still love me, for we were still together, even after all this time. One warm summer evening we were enjoying a pleasant evening together. We were alone for the first time in ages, and were chatting over a bottle of good wine and freshly prepared food, just the two of us. I'd wanted to ask Punchinella a question, one I'd longed to ask for some time. Maybe now we're getting regular work, we'll be able to purchase a nice little cottage of our own somewhere, just the three of us. By the sea, maybe, I asked hopefully. I didn't get the reaction I expected from Punchinella. He sat up sharply. "Are you never a happy woman?" Jumping to his feet, shouting, he turned on me unexpectedly. "I'm working all the hours I can, and you're still not happy, Judy. I don't know what you want from me. You nag and nag and—" He cut short what he was saying and stormed off, leaving me confused and a picnic to clear away. I wanted to blame Donetian for Punchinella's bad habits. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I knew Punchinella's problems with drink and drugs went much further back than that. He was drinking because, as he once told me, he liked the taste. And drugs? It started those when he and Scaramouche were experimenting with that new Chinese tobacco, Madak. All I knew was his behaviour was becoming erratic again, especially since he started going to those writers' salons. Most salons served alcohol, but now they were providing some mind-altering drug called opium. I couldn't ask him to stop meeting writers for theatre-goers wanted to hear scripted plays, stories that they could read about in books. It was a different style of writing to that which Punchinella had been used to. It meant our actors had to memorise lines now, and rehearsals took longer. Mine was still acceptable in our street performances, but audiences were changing. I was left feeling confused, yet mad at Punchinella at the same time. What was so wrong with wanting a home to call our own? I was angry by the time I arrived home. I couldn't let Punchinella get away with speaking to me like he did. At the same time, I was expected to stand by my husband, like a good little wife. Then again, I had been the breadwinner for a little while, and where did I get the thanks for that? The arguments went on and on in my head for the rest of the evening. It was the early hours of the next morning before Punchinella arrived home. Once again, full of apologies. But he was in for a surprise. I refused to accept his apology like a meek little wifey. I didn't deserve to be spoken to the way he did the evening before. If I was going to be blamed for nagging, something I tried always to avoid as it wasn't ladylike, then nagging is what he will get. I challenged Punchinella on his drinking and drugs, and quite an argument ensued. Punchinella was taken by surprise. Nicholas walked in to find out what the noise was all about and got yelled at just for standing there. His father looked at him, then at me, then walked towards Nicholas and pushed right past him on the way to his bed. Nicholas rushed to my side. I was shaking. We never had a full-blown argument like that for such a long time. I just looked at Nicholas and I burst into tears. It took a while, but anger finally dissipated, leaving me numb and in a state of shock. Punchinella arose early that morning even before Nicholas and I awoke. He was gone. We didn't know where, and we didn't know when, or even if he would come back. "Where else is he going to go?" pointed out Nicholas when I started to become anxious. I questioned some of the others, but they either hadn't seen him or they weren't prepared to get involved. It was a few days before Punchinello finally arrived home. Apparently he had set to work on a new play, and whilst he was out looking for props, he had found a new machine that he was all excited about. "It's a sausage-making machine," he announced proudly, showing it to all the players. "Instead of having to buy our sausages from the local butcher, we can make our own. It's portable," he announced excitedly, waving his hands at the machine in a flourish. "Ta-da!" I'd heard they were inventing machines to do all sorts of jobs, and mincing all types of meats would save a lot of time chopping and cutting with our large family. I couldn't see how he intended to use as a prop in our plays. And just who did he think would be using this machine of his? I wondered, rolling my eyes at the thought. I worried at the growth of the machines. The world was changing, and changing faster than ever before. Normally, Punchinello had no interest in any of it, preferring to stay with what he knew best, the master of all his domain. But now suddenly this machine, for some strange reason, had caught his attention, and I for one did not intend to get in his way, for when he got excited about something, when he took interest in anything but work, he would get totally absorbed in his new interest. He intended mastering the use of the machine himself, and spent hours mincing all sorts of meats. He was working so fast one day that he picked up a dog and almost put it in the sausage machine. That did give everyone a laugh, and it was decided to make it part of the street plays. Not using a real dog, of course. I have to admit, I used the same prank in my puppet shows, but I didn't tell him. The Theatres Act eventually changed regulations, allowing playwrights to get permits for theatrical troupes to perform for up to 60 days at a time. This was good news for our troupe, for it meant they could tour the country for longer, perform as many shows as they wanted in each town without fear of being moved on, and it meant the men and many of the women would be away for long periods at a time. Nicholas and I were required to keep the home fires burning and look after the young ones whilst the troupe were away, which suited us fine, for it gave Nicholas and I time to pursue our own interests when we weren't doing puppet shows. A bonus for us, which probably sounds awful, but our lives were less stressful when Punchinello wasn't around. Distance between us, at least these past few months, seemed to make for a better marriage, and I will probably feel guilty for saying that, but it's true. Despite the alcohol and drugs available at the writers' salons, it was still a good place to meet intelligent and interesting people. Nicholas and I met Dr. Conan Doyle at one of the salons when Arthur was touring his new book, Sherlock Holmes. We struck up quite a friendship with him, which lasted for a few years. He'd seen Punchinello around and knew, well, he knew him, by reputation alone. Apparently Punchinello's erratic behaviour had been noted by others, which was rather embarrassing, as I'd hoped it had been something kept hidden from the outside world. I thought it was confined to only in our home. Usually when Punchinello was in a mood, I could play his kissy-kissy game and get him to our bedroom without too much of an incident being seen by others. But of course, no child, regardless of how old they are, wants to see their parents showing public affection. Nicholas was no different. He was only too happy to leave the room on those occasions and block up his ears, as Punchinella could get pretty loud when he was high. Occasionally, though, he was beyond the happy drunken stage. He would get so drunk that I couldn't undress him easily. He'd fight with me, arms flaying everywhere, uncontrollably, and I'd get struck in the face, albeit unintentionally, although I would get the occasional slap for speaking back to him or ignoring him. It was on those nights when I refused to attend to him immediately that he would pick on Nicholas. Once or twice I'd walk into the room just in time to stop Nicholas from losing his temper with his father. At first, asking Nicholas to leave was enough, but tension between them was growing, and Nicholas becoming more and more angry. On occasions I had to absolutely insist on his leaving the room by shouting at him. Nicholas still did as I asked, shrugging with annoyance, but more at me than with his father. Living as one big family was now proving to be a problem, for me anyway. If I could, I'd just throw a blanket over Punchinella and leave him to sleep it off whenever he collapsed. But as there was other people using communal areas, I had to struggle to get him to bed. I knew Nicholas was as angry with me as I was with Punchinella, more so in fact, because I wouldn't let him help. But as daft as it sounds, I was relieved to know that at least one of the men in my life listened to me. I didn't know what to do with Punchinella's behaviour. Other than Nicholas, I had no family and no real friends to call upon, or maybe it was more to do with my pride. My ego wouldn't let me ask for help, even from the other players. He was my husband, and I married him for better and for worse. We'd started off as happy, and now I was seeing him at his worst. But what can you do when the vow you took was till death us do part? What do you do when there is no death?